can one ordinary man, born into humble beginnings, truly reshape the destiny of an entire continent? In the aftermath of a devastating war, a world bruised and broken, how do nations seek solace or vengeance? When an economy crumbles and hope fades, what desperate measures do people turn to? How does a charismatic voice capture the hearts and minds of millions, promising a new dawn? Who was this individual, seemingly insignificant, yet destined for such monumental impact? What hidden forces, what simmering resentments allow such extreme ideologies to take root? Before the storm fully breaks, are there warning signs we often overlook? And how did the very treaties meant to ensure peace inadvertently sow the seeds of future conflict? Join curiosity, Adam, as we uncover the astonishing journey of Adolf Hitler, from his earliest days to the precipice of global war. But before we dive deeper, if you're curious about history, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Adolf Hitler was born on April 20th, 1889, in Braunau am Inn, a small town in what was then Austria-Hungary. His early life was marked by a strained relationship with his authoritarian father, Alois, and the early death of his beloved mother, Clara. As a young man, Hitler harbored dreams of becoming an artist, but his applications to the Academy of Fine Arts Vienna were rejected twice. Living in Vienna, he was exposed to a melting pot of ideas, including extreme nationalism and anti-Semitism, which began to shape his worldview. The outbreak of World War I in 1914 was, for Hitler, a moment of profound personal significance. He eagerly volunteered for the German army, and he served as a dispatch runner on the Western Front, proving himself a brave, if unremarkable soldier, earning the Iron Cross. Germany's defeat and the harsh terms of the Treaty of Versailles left Hitler, like many Germans, feeling betrayed and humiliated. Discharged from the army, he found a new purpose in the burgeoning nationalist movements, joining the German Workers' Party in 1919. He quickly rose through its ranks, redesigning the party's symbol and ideology, transforming it into the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or Nazi Party. In 1923, his attempt to seize power in the beer hall Putsch failed, leading to his arrest and imprisonment. It was during this time that he penned Mein Kampf, outlining his racial ideology and political ambitions. The Great Depression, beginning in 1929, provided fertile ground for the Nazis. As economic hardship deepened, Hitler's promises of national revival resonated. His powerful, captivating speeches offered simple answers to complex problems, blaming Jews and communists for Germany's woes. On January 30th, 1933. Despite initial resistance, President Paul von Hindenburg appointed Adolf Hitler as Chancellor of Germany. The Reichstag fire in February 1933, a mere month after his appointment, served as a pretext to suspend civil liberties and consolidate power. On March 23, 1933, the Reichstag passed the Enabling Act, a legislative maneuver that formally handed dictatorial powers to Hitler, allowing him to rule by decree. Under the guise of protecting the nation, Hitler's stormtroopers unleashed a wave of terror, targeting communists, socialists, and anyone perceived as a threat. Within months, and all other political parties were outlawed or voluntarily disbanded. Germany was rapidly transforming into a one-party state. Censorship tightened its grip, and the infamous book burnings symbolized the regime's war on independent thought and perceived un-German ideas. The first concentration camps, initially for political prisoners, began to appear, silencing dissent through fear and brutality. But even within the Nazi Party, internal rivalries festered. Ernst Röhm, the powerful leader of the SA, saw his stormtroopers as a revolutionary army. Hitler, fearing Röhm's growing influence and the SA's radical demands, orchestrated the Night of the Long Knives in June 1934. Hundreds of SA leaders, along with other political adversaries, were brutally murdered, consolidating Hitler's absolute control over the party and the state. Just weeks later, in August 1934, the aged President Paul von Hindenburg passed away. Hitler swiftly moved to combine the offices of Chancellor and President, declaring himself Führer und Reichskanzler, leader and Chancellor. From this moment, every soldier, every public servant swore an oath of personal loyalty directly to Adolf Hitler, cementing his totalitarian rule. With total power secured, Hitler immediately set about transforming Germany into the Third Reich, a 1,000-year empire built on Nazi ideology. Defying the Treaty of Versailles, he began a massive rearmament program, rapidly expanding the army, navy, and air force, signaling aggressive intentions. Economic recovery was paramount. Massive public works like the Autobahn created jobs and bolstered national pride, masking the true costs. Programs like Strength Through Joy offered state-subsidized leisure activities, and fostering a sense of national unity and loyalty to the regime. In 1935, the infamous Nuremberg Laws stripped Jewish citizens of their German citizenship and prohibited marriages between Jews and Germans. Joseph Goebbels, Minister of Propaganda, meticulously controlled all media, shaping public opinion and relentlessly promoting the Führer cult. The youth were heavily indoctrinated through organizations like the Hitler Youth, preparing them for a future of unwavering allegiance to the Nazi state. In 1936, Hitler took his first major gamble, ordering German troops to reoccupy the demilitarized Rhineland, a direct violation of the Versailles Treaty. The international community, still reeling from the Great Depression and wary of another war, offered little resistance, emboldening Hitler further. Germany's economy was increasingly geared towards autarky and war preparation, a 4-year plan designed to make the nation self-sufficient in raw materials. By 1937, the Rome-Berlin axis with fascist Italy solidified, forming a dangerous alliance that threatened the fragile peace of Europe. Hitler's next target was his native Austria, demanding its unification with Germany, a move he called the Anschluss. In March 1938, German troops marched unopposed into Austria, annexing it to the Third Reich to widespread public acclaim there. Emboldened by the easy success in Austria, Hitler now turned his eyes to the Sudetenland, a German-speaking area inside Czechoslovakia. He demanded its return to Germany, claiming the Czechs were mistreating ethnic Germans. European leaders panicked, rushed to negotiate. In September 1938, Britain and France signed the Munich Agreement, handing the Sudetenland to Hitler without firing a shot. German soldiers marched in and were greeted as liberators. Hitler's gamble had worked again. Chamberlain returned home declaring, "Peace for our time." But Hitler saw only weakness. 6 months later, in March 1939, Hitler broke his promise and occupied the rest of Czechoslovakia. The world finally realized appeasement had failed. Britain and France promised to protect Poland next. Hitler now prepared his boldest gamble yet, an alliance with his sworn enemy, Stalin. In August 1939, the Nazi-Soviet non-aggression pact was signed in Moscow. Secret clauses divided Poland between them. Hitler now had a free hand. At 4:45 a.m. on September 1st, 1939, German forces invaded Poland. The Blitzkrieg, Lightning War, shocked the world. Poland fought bravely, but the German war machine was unstoppable. On September 17th, Soviet forces attacked from the east as secretly agreed. Poland was wiped off the map in just 36 days. Britain and France declared war on September 3rd, 1939. World War II had begun. In just 6 weeks, Hitler had conquered Poland and humiliated the Western powers. The dictator, who started as a failed artist, now controlled half of Europe. Back home in Germany, the people celebrated wildly. Hitler was at the peak of his power. From obscurity in Vienna to dictator of the Third Reich in just 25 years, he stood before the Reichstag and declared Germany invincible. For 8 months, nothing happened in the West, the so-called phony war. Then, in April 1940, Hitler struck again. Denmark and Norway fell in hours. On May 10th, 1940, the real Blitzkrieg began against Holland, Belgium, and France. The French and British armies were completely outmaneuvered. Paris fell on the 14th of June. France surrendered just 6 weeks after the attack. Hitler visited Paris as a tourist, the ultimate symbol of triumph. When he returned to Berlin, the entire nation went wild with joy. At this moment, Adolf Hitler was the most powerful man on earth, from a homeless painter to ruler of an empire stretching from the Arctic to the Pyrenees. But the seeds of his ultimate destruction had already been planted. Convinced he was invincible, Hitler now prepared to invade the Soviet Union. It would be the mistake that finally ended his rise. The man who rose from nothing had conquered Europe, but the fall would be just as fast. This was the peak of the Third Reich, the moment when one man's ambition changed the world forever. On June 22, 1941, Hitler launched the largest invasion in human history, Operation Barbarossa. 3 million men, 3,500 tanks, and 2,700 aircraft smashed across a 1,800-mile front. The Blitzkrieg seemed unstoppable once again. Stalin was caught completely by surprise. In the first 3 months, the Red Army lost over 2 million men. Entire Soviet armies were wiped out. Hitler was convinced the Soviet Union would collapse in weeks. He even diverted forces south to seize Ukraine's grain and oil. At first, many Ukrainians saw the Germans as liberators from Stalin's terror. But behind the lines, the true horror began. Millions would die in German captivity. By November, the Germans stood only 20 miles from Moscow. Then the Russian winter struck with full force. Temperatures plunged to minus 40 degrees. Engines froze. Weapons jammed. Soldiers froze to death in their foxholes. Stalin threw fresh Siberian divisions into the fight. The German advance ground to a halt. Hitler flew into a fury and sacked his top generals. The dream of quick victory was over. On the 11th of December 1941, Hitler made another catastrophic mistake. He declared war on the United States. Now Germany faced the combined industrial might of America, Britain, and the Soviet Union. In summer 1942, Hitler tried one last grand offensive to win the war in the East. The battle for Stalingrad became the bloodiest in history. Hitler ordered his Sixth Army to fight to the last man. On January 31st, 1943, the entire German Sixth Army surrendered. Over 300,000 men lost. When Hitler heard the news, he flew into one of his worst rages ever recorded. Stalingrad was the true turning point. From this moment, the German army was on permanent retreat in the East. The myth of German invincibility was shattered forever. In July 1943, Hitler launched one final desperate attack at Kursk, the largest tank battle ever fought. The Germans lost. The Red Army now held the initiative on every front. In the West, America and Britain were preparing the invasion of Europe. Night after night, Allied bombers turned German cities into rubble. Hitler's health collapsed. He suffered from Parkinson's tremors and was pumped full of drugs. Even his own generals tried to kill him in the July 20th plot. Hitler survived by sheer luck. His revenge was brutal. Hundreds were tortured and executed. On June 6, 1944, the Allies stormed the beaches of Normandy. A second front was open. Paris was liberated in August. The German army in the West was collapsing. In the East, the Red Army crossed into Germany itself, exacting terrible revenge. By late 1944, Hitler lived permanently in the Berlin bunker, refusing to accept reality. His final gamble, the Battle of the Bulge, failed within weeks. By April 1945, the Red Army stood on the outskirts of Berlin. He sent children and old men to fight. The Third Reich was eating its own children. The once mighty dictator, who rose from obscurity, now ruled only a few ruined city blocks. On April 29th, he married Eva Braun. The next day, both took their own lives. Their bodies were burned in a shell crater. The man who wanted a 1,000-year Reich lasted only 12 years. On May 2nd, the Red Army captured the Reichstag. Germany surrendered unconditionally on May 8th. Germany lay in total ruins, cities flattened, millions dead, the country divided, from a homeless failed artist to absolute dictator, and finally to the architect of his nation's total destruction. The world held the surviving Nazis accountable at Nuremberg. The nightmare was over. Germany would remain divided for 45 years because of the monster it once followed. 6 million Jews and millions more had been murdered in the name of the twisted vision that began in a Vienna shelter. The rise was complete. The fall was total. One man's hunger for power had dragged the entire world into war and genocide. Today, Germany stands as a democracy and a warning to the world. The story of Adolf Hitler proves that no one is too insignificant to change history, for better or for worse. From total obscurity to absolute dictator, and then to total ruin in just 25 years.